So Can you hear the snow calling as it's carried across the plain? You're calling, it's calling you back to face the music, and the sun is coming through. You're calling, the one that is calling is you. Take a promise, take a vow, just you feel it's easy now. Understand the voice within and feel a change right begin. Oh, tell me again. Oh, can you feel it? Oh, won't you tell me again? We are all from the future, and you're right begins now. You're already falling, it's calling you on this place that we and the soul is never through. You're already falling, the one that is calling is through. Each and every heart you see. Each and every rise of sun is really bad. I love you. Tell me again. Oh, can you feel it? Oh, tell me again. Tell me again. Can you feel it?
Good afternoon. I know we do have a couple of minutes before it's 12, but I'm going to go ahead and start with introductions today so we can begin exactly at 12 p.m. We would like to welcome our visitors, both online and in-house today. We have if you're not with us today and you're joining us virtually, we have such a wonderful attendance today. Thank you to everyone for coming out. Before we get started, I just want everyone to know that we do have one more History for Lunch for the month of April, and that will be on Wednesday, April the 20th at 12 p.m. And the museum will celebrate National Kite Month with a talk on the past, current, and future of kites by Chris Maxup. He is the account executive of HQ Kites and Designs USA that is located in Powell's Point, North Carolina. And Chris will explain how kites apply to the real life and their presence on the Outer Banks. So a lot of the kites that you see at Kitty Hawk Kites, they are a product of Chris and his company. But today we would like to welcome Miss Lucy Daniels. Actually, Miss Daniels was suggested to me just before we went into the pandemic. And even though we have really enjoyed the virtual programming, sometimes I think it's important that some guests be in person. So we kind of waited around a little bit, and now we're able to have Mrs. Daniels with us. She is co-author and a registered nurse who today will explore the abandoned first colony in 1587 by English explorers through her book, In Pursuit of Dorothie, the Lost Colony Ship. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Miss Daniels, but thank you for joining us today. Okay, you want to try again? Oops.
I'm going to do that too, I'm sure. There you go.
Understand the voice within and feel a change already begin. Oh, tell me again. Oh, can you feel it? Oh, tell me again. Each and every heart it seems is bound to bear a worldly truth. Each and every rising sun is really bad, alone and nowhere alone. Won't you tell me again? Oh, can you feel it? Oh, won't you tell me again tonight? Oh, won't you tell me again? Oh, can you feel it? Oh, won't you tell me again tonight?
Now, imagine traveling in a boat that size and that holds about 40 people on a 10-week journey to America 3 times. Dorothy came to America 3 times. The Elizabeth II is a replica of the types of ships of Penance that were used to come to the New World. Dorothy was a 50-ton Penance. That video was taken in 1986 as a anniversary celebration of when the Dorothy traveled through the Albemarle Sound, through the Roanoke Sound, through the Albemarle Sound, up the Chowan River, all the way to Winton, North Carolina. This is very well documented. So my husband and I were in a boat, that's why it was wavy, taking a picture of a ship. So that's quite impressive. My name is Lucy Daniels, and my husband did about 20 years of research on the Dorothy. We found nobody ever talks about Dorothy. And he knew about a ship in Bennett's Creek, and he just started researching about the ships that came to America. And we discovered that the Dorothy was left here intentionally in 1587 for the colony that became misplaced. He was an historian, he was a broadcaster, he managed a radio station in Ahoskie and was the main broadcaster. After he passed away, they named the studio after him, the Don Upchurch Studios, and that's 99.3. Now it's the Bull. So after he passed away, he had written some audio recordings because he was a broadcaster. And I listened to the audio CDs and transcribed them. And then I set about trying to get a good timeline and cut out some conversational items and some redundancy that we have when we discuss things, and turned it into, I've cut out 33,000 words to be exact, but I created a timeline that keeps you from having to say, remember when. You can flip back and look at the pages. I had written some short stories before. I'm a registered nurse, and I pride myself on being in nursing since I was 17 when I went to nursing school. And so it was kind of a jump for me to do this, but I'm really, really happy that I did. And I'm so grateful for the audience for coming to listen to this, because I love to share these facts. What I'm going to tell you is based on fact. It's based on ship's logs and captain's logs and mathematicians' records, John White's drawings and recordings. That's the wrong word because they weren't recording. They and writing, we'll say writing. So Don got very interested in this. There is a ship at the edge of the Dismal Swamp that he had heard about, and he talked with Roy Johnson, who was a publisher and an author, and he was just intrigued by that. And the story is that back in the 1800s, this ship was discovered in what was called the Light Streak. It was an area in Gates County around Acorn Hill that's just past Merchant's Mill Pond on the way to the Dismal Swamp. This area was used by the shingle cutters, and it was transversed, and a ship was found in a very decayed state, however, very well preserved, and it had a copper bottom. And in the 1800s, for it to already be decaying, you go, how did it get there? Because there wasn't a river there then. It was swampy. So we think about that, especially the copper bottom part. So in my husband's research, he went to Raleigh and talked with scientists and archaeologists. And one gentleman said to him, the copper bottom ship was not invented in the 1500s. And Don said, sir, actually, Sir Walter Raleigh invented the copper bottom ship, and he had many ships. He owned, it's hard for me to say, but at least a dozen ships. And ships kept getting renamed too, so that kind of makes it complicated, but he owned a lot of ships. So the other really interesting thing about this ship is Hunter's Mill Pond was built in the early 1700s. Now, once you build a mill pond on a stream, you can't get a ship past it. So the ship had to get there before the 1700s. So I'll take you back to 1584. Amadas and Barlow sailed with Sir Walter Raleigh's ships, two ships, the Bart Raleigh, a 200-ton ship, and the Dorothie, a 50-ton ship. Now, the way tons were measured was how much wine the ship could take. So apparently that was a very important asset to have on the journey. Now, these journeys took about 10 weeks. They were met by 3 Native Americans that came. I love this story. I love this story. And my friend Devanya Chavis, I don't see her in the audience, but she told me that she would watch on Zoom. She is a Native American Chewanak. And she and I become friends and shared information together. And she's very busy. She is a pharmacist, a lawyer. She's got like 3 degrees. And so I didn't even ask her to come, and she said she'd be here or she'd be Zooming in support of me. So she's been very helpful when we discuss things. And I wanted her to particularly hear the story. So they were met by 3, it's not in the book. They were met by 3 Native Americans and they came on board the ship and ate and drank some meat and wine, which they liked very much. And they were just signaling at each other, you know, communication. There was no voice communication. So one of the gentlemen, when he left the ship, and this is in Old English, and this is a big thing about researching this literature. It is written in Old English, and sometimes you go like, what did that say? So when he returned to his boat, he fell to fishing. And in less than half an hour, he had laden his boat as deep as it could swim. So the boat was about to sink because it was that full of fish. And he took the fish back to the ships and gave to the visitors. So I think that's quite profound. That was the initial meeting of the English and the Native Americans. Armadas and Barlow, they were welcomed. The women took care of them. They fed them. They traded goods. They welcomed them. They observed tools that didn't quite seem to fit the culture, and they realized they had come from shipwrecks. They even witnessed some children with brown hair, and they told them that 26 years ago there had been a ship with some white men that did survive. They were made very, very welcome. And of course, Manio went back with them to England. They went back with Manio and One Cheese. Now, when they wrote the report, they were told by Sir Walter Raleigh, don't say anything negative, make it all good. So they told them about the bounty of the deer and the wildlife and the fish and the natural beauty of the area. They told them about Native American girls walking around with nothing but coral on their breast. They told them about the beautiful waterways and how wonderful it would be to live there. And they were sure there was gold and valuables and treasures. So everybody's ready to keep going. So in late June of 1585, Sir Richard Granville dropped off Ralph Lane and 100 men. This was a military setup. Now you have to think about the fact that the whole reason they went over there is the Spanish ships were coming from South America and filled with silver and gold and riches and spices. And they wanted somewhere to have a base camp so they could raid the Spanish ships. Now, it was legal to raid a Spanish ship if you were an Englishman. You were called a pirateer. Now, a pirate steals from his own people, but a pirateer is a gentleman, and he steals for the queen. So this group that got dropped off with 100 men had some very important names. John White, who is the famous artist from the 1500s, Thomas Harriot, who was a mathematician equal in brilliance to Einstein or Modest. It certainly had One Cheese and Manio were present also. Now, I need you to understand how rough the North Carolina coast is, just in case you don't already know. The Tiger was a gift from the Queen, and that was filled with supplies. And it was so rough that the Tiger lost its supplies when they were landing. So here they start out short of stuff right away, short of supplies. So look at what they accomplished. They left England and came down past Spain and Portugal, past the Azores, past the Cape of Africa, well, maybe not the Cape, but part of Africa, and swung down and came by Puerto Rico, Cuba, and up to North Carolina. Now, the reason they did that is, I'll show you, is because the way our Gulf Stream works and the westerly winds that blow across, it would be hard and it would take more time to go the other way. So they did it in a circle. So it was quite an undertaking. Like I said, 10 weeks one way. So while they were here, another important thing I want to mention is, like, when they first got here, they stopped at this inlet, which is right at the Roanoke Island. It's not there now. There is a marker. It's called Port Ferdinando, after Simon Ferdinando, one of the captains. They didn't just go through that inlet. They explored it. And when they sent the ship in, they always would, Dorothie could fit through the inlet. But remember, these inlets, sometimes they're shallow. So they would bank off on the ocean with their anchors. In 1585, they sent out an exploration to the Chesapeake Bay, and they could tell that that was the real deal. It had a deeper bay, had an easier access, and didn't have all these shoals that North Carolina had. So And then they decided to explore the Albemarle Sound Chowan River. Now, this is a marker in close to where I live in Harrisville, North Carolina. And this is the name of the tribe that I'm most familiar with and I want to talk to you about. Now, you see how I have it spelled up there at the top? My friend Devanya Chavis, who is a Chowanoke, she says that is the correct way. So she is right. She actually has her law degree in Indian law. So you know how things change. In fact, if you've noticed the way I've spelled Raleigh, you're going like, she doesn't know how to spell Raleigh. Well, actually, I do. I'm spelling it the way he spelled it himself. So this is the marker of this 2000 settlement of Algonquian Indians right there in Harrisville, right on the Chowan River. Their king was Menadanon, and he was the king of the Algonquian tribe and ruled over other chiefs. So as they explored the Chowan River, they explored everything. They sent a party down to Hatteras and realized that the sounds were very shallow. They were just looking to see how their odds would be of being able to jut out and surprise these ships. They met Menadanon. Menadanon, it said that he was impotent. Now, I want you to understand that that meant he couldn't walk. He was the most powerful king all up and down the Chowan, Blackwater, and Nottoway rivers. So he was capable of putting 700 warriors out to fight, but he never raised an arrow against the white men. That's not true of other Native Americans. So Lane actually kidnapped Skyko, who was his heir. I want to say son, but I never can find the word son, but I can find the word heir. So he kidnapped him and took him all the way back to Roanoke Island. And the reason he did this was to get information to have leverage over Menadanon, because what he really wanted was to know where all the gold is, all the copper is, and they actually were under the belief that, looking at the United States, that there had to be like a direct water route to take you to the Pacific Ocean, which there is not. So, but they were convinced that you could. So Menadanon tells them how to get to the Chesapeake Bay. And he also tells them about the riches of the Roanoke River, because he wants them gone from his place. So here, these pictures were drawn by an artist. Her name is Darla Jordan, and all the pictures in the books are original. She made I can't say the word, whimsical drawings of John White's drawings, but then she drew these maps for me. So I wish I had a pointer, but I don't. So what we're looking at here is that little island down there, the little white thing is the Holiday Island, and the Chowan River goes northwest. It keeps right on going northwest. And the village was right there, the Chonoke village right there. And all this is important. Bennett's Creek is where we're going to talk about how the ship got up there. So it's documented that Ralph Lane went all the way to Winton, and the river gets very narrow there. There's also on these creeks of the Chowan, Catherine Creek and Deep Creek, there have been found remnants of boats, and they had 4 boats too, and I can prove it to you in a little bit. Okay, so here's a picture that you've seen from watching the video of the actual Elizabeth II, which is a replica of boats that were used. Ralph Lane documented all about the sounds. He talked about all the shoals and any difficulties, and he declared that the Albemarle Sound was wonderful for shipping and transporting, and that the Chowan River was 2 miles wide and didn't have a current, was just affected by the wind. They went up the Roanoke River, and I don't think I told that story here, so I'll share that with you, maybe there. They went up the Roanoke River to explore because they thought that's where the copper was, and they got attacked by the Mango Indians, who were very hostile Indians. They were fighting Indians. They went up there and they were attacked by these Native Americans. And it took them 4 days to go up there. And with the current that was on the Roanoke River before the dam, it took them 1 day to get back. They actually had to eat a couple of dogs because it took them longer to get there than they anticipated. But there was a lot of current in the Roanoke River at that time, so that wasn't good for their what they needed to know too. So Ralph Lane found himself very dependent on the Native Americans. They lost a whole supply ship of goods, and Ralph Lane kind of had an attitude. He was like, feed me, give me fish, give me deer. And he started wars. He accused someone of stealing a cup, which they later found, and he murdered an Indian. And also the Roanoke tribe was on Mans Harbor. And Mans Harbor, of course, is right there by Roanoke Island. So he plotted, Skyco was with him, and he used Skyco to manipulate him. And he plotted against Wingina and actually murdered him and beheaded him. So he had rough relationships with where he was. So they were trying to figure out how to get to the Chesapeake Bay and how to get to somewhere safer. So they were having hard times. They'd been there almost a year and were having lots of trouble. And Sir Francis Drake shows up with 23 ships. Now, I told you about pirateering. That's big business, isn't it? So he shows up and he says, I can give you supplies. I can give you another ship. I can give you some additional men. And Ralph Lane says, that sounds good. Now, the whole time, John White and Thomas Harriot have been making a map. It's the Virginia Pars. It's in the Museum of Britain at this day. And it is so accurate, it is crazy. They charted all the sounds, they charted the rivers, they charted the lands. It's just amazing. Thomas Harriot was a mathematician and John was an artist, and they combined their talent. So they had these men on here, and he's like, we'll stay a little longer. Well, just about that time, it came up a big storm, and they had just murdered the Native American that lived within sight of them, and they got scared and they decided they'd just go home. So they loaded up the ship, and even in that, they were losing things. Like John White was trying to get his precious documents on the ship, and the rough seas, he lost charts, maps. They lost a lot of stuff, but they did salvage the Virginia Pars 1585 map, and that is still of value, extreme value today. Now, they had sent 3 men up the Chowan River to return Skyco because they decided to leave, and they were going to be nice enough to return the heir to King Monadnock. So keep in mind, they're getting ready to leave, and there's 3 men on the loose. A terrible hurricane raged for 4 days, and in the process of trying to get these men loaded and supplies loaded, they gave up on the 3 men and just left them. So we got 3 white men stuck here. And then wouldn't you know, within days of Lane's departure, here comes an emergency supply ship. And better yet, Granville returns. You know, he's the one that left them there. And he manages to communicate with 3 Native Americans and figure out that they had left. And he left 15 men. So now we've got 15 more men here, Englishmen. Now, he could have left many more, but he just didn't know about the hostilities. So everything looks like they want to come back here, except they've made a decision. They're going to the Chesapeake Bay, and that's very important because they've had these episodes of difficulty with the shores of North Carolina. So they want to go to the Chesapeake Bay. So they get 116 more men and women and boys together, and they're going across. So it's 117 souls. And Simon Ferdinando is master captain of the ship. And Dorothie's there, and there's a flyboat too. So they've got 3 ships on the way to America. So they get here, and as the Dorothie sails through the inlet, Simon Ferdinando says, I'm not messing with you guys anymore. You're supposed to be checking on these 18 men, but you just go ahead and check on them because I'm going to dump you out here and I got to go privateering. So that's a big upset because they're supposed to go to Chesapeake, but here they are on Roanoke Island. And so they're settling in, and Simon Ferdinando's kind of flirting around out there privateering. And so we have Virginia Dare born. 5 days, let's see, Manio is christened Lord of Roanoke. Juan Cheese was never as friendly as Manio. Juan Cheese had difficulties with the way they treated the Native Americans. Virginia Dare was born on the 18th. And also another baby is born to the Harvey family, and they don't say what sex. So there was 2 babies born on Roanoke Island during that time. So the colonists decide that they need to send John White back to England because they've gotten there later than they meant to. The harvest is too late to plant crops, and the flyboat is even missing. Like they're missing part of their people. Well, a couple of days later, the flyboat shows up, so that makes them feel better. But John White is leaving them. And that's the part of the story that you really remember, is that they came over here, all these people, and then John White went back to get supplies. So I want to talk to you about hurricanes. This is my pier on the Chowan River, and we are having a hurricane. You see, there's some missing parts. So documented history, right at this time when John White's trying to get away, he's fighting this other battle with the waves, trying to leave because they're having storm after storm, and they have a hurricane. And then after he leaves, they have another hurricane. And that's very, very important because if you live in Eastern North Carolina waterways, when we have a hurricane, the water can come up about 4 feet. And that's why Bennett's Creek would be high enough to transport a ship up there. Personally, I've seen with Hurricane Floyd, Floyd, and Matthew, you have big water rises. Like Floyd was about 4 feet. So you've got these storms, and you've got, in fact, 10 of the men were injured trying to secure everybody and the supplies they needed to make the trip back. So you had the capstan on the anchor broke and 10 men were injured. So they were left with Virginia Parr's map, and they were left with very specific instructions to go to Chesapeake. Now think about how you get to Chesapeake with one ship that holds 40 people and 4 boats that hold 20 people. So that is not even going to cover all the people, right? So because you've got these open boats and you've only got Dorothie that will hold 40 people. So you've now got 118 people because you got 2 babies. So you're right on a tight line there. So think about, they are supposed to get to the Chesapeake Bay. So it makes sense from what John White had said, the maps that he drew, and the research that he'd done, that they couldn't put 118 on Dorothie and go around the ocean to get to Chesapeake Bay. They had a hostile tribe. They had just murdered their chief, and they did not need to be there. And they even told the Secretary of State for Queen Elizabeth, that they were moving 50 miles inland. So that's their goal, is get away from here, get to the Chesapeake Bay. John White's coming back with supplies to the Chesapeake Bay. So looking at this map, you can see where Roanoke Island is, and it's very accurate looking, and this is a replica of John White's maps. See Chesapeake Bay right up there? And the Dismal Swamp too is that little circle, and that's going to enter in on the story. So, and that's a more modern map, and you can see the similarities. Now, here's the Albemarle Sound as it was depicted by John White. And this is a picture of where we live, guys, from a 10,000 feet in an airplane. I took that picture. I am a pilot, and I wasn't flying that plane though. And I took that picture. The Alligator River is that big body of water in the middle there. But you can see that that's taken right over Duck, which is the northern Outer Banks, where the wing is. So you can see the beauty of where we live. This is the Chowan River cliffs, and the damage that was done with Matthew took a lot of cliff space away. There's 63-foot cliffs. And this is a picture of the Suffolk Scar, where the ocean used to be, and that's you'll see shells and stuff in there, because years and years and years and years and years ago, this ocean actually came to where that red line is. And there's coral and stuff. So on this picture right here, it shows you how Bennett's Creek comes up to the Dismal Swamp. So this is the mouth of the Dismal Swamp. I'm sorry, Bennett's Creek. I was in the water and took this picture. Now that's the mouth to a creek. Does that look like a river to you? Okay, it does to me too. Now, the Chowan River. Okay, so here's a picture of Bennett's Creek as it goes to Merchant's Mill Pond and as it goes through. So, okay, now here we go. At the bottom is the island, Holiday Island, and over to the left is the Roanoke Indian Village. Now, the Chowan is the wider stream that goes northwest. Now, on the map, they had a map that said go all the way to the Roanoke Village. It ended at the village. So they didn't have a map after that. And they did not have longitude. So they were told to go north past the Roanoke, past the village, past the Roanoke Village. So think about this. They looked at that picture right there. They were looking at that. Uh-oh, I went the wrong way. Uh-oh. I knew I was going to do it, Lori. So they're trying to get their people safely to Chesapeake Bay. They can't put them on an ocean liner and go that way. So they're doing what they were told to do. They're exploring the Albemarle Sound and the Chowan River. They're passing these beautiful 63-foot cliffs, and they're looking at that. And they're told to go north, and that creek goes north, and their map ran out, and they don't have longitude. Now, the reason I know they have 4 boats with them is because when John White got back to England, they could not come to port because they didn't have ship's boats. That's what happened. You anchored off in the ocean and your ship's boat came, and it was recorded in history that they did not have any ship's boats. Same thing when the Lion returned with Simon Ferdinando, didn't have any ship's boats. So we know historically that they were left with a ship that would hold 40 people and 4 boats that would hold 20 people. So they could easily have taken the wrong route. And if they did that, they would transverse up Bennett's Creek. And remember, they just had 2 hurricanes and the water would have been high. And that's what the water looked like on the creek. You saw that. That was me in the spring of 18 on a boat taking that picture. So it easily could have connected to Merchant's Mill Pond and gone on towards the Dismal Swamp, which is what we believe. You know, the thing is, there is a ship there. There is a ship there. So the water had to be high at some time. And the light streak is an area that almost looks like it was a riverbed. It didn't have any trees growing in it, and it was always kind of barren. But it's not barren now. It's all grown up with water moccasins, which is part of the problem. I keep getting ahead of myself there. So this is pretty much the story of why we think that very well could be. There is a copper bottom ship there. It is very decayed. It had to be there before the 1700s. Bennett Creek does connect. Monadnock had told them how to get to Chesapeake Bay by the river, and then you'd have to transverse a little bit of land. And when you look at a map and you look at some of the drawings I have, you can see that that's very possible. So that's what we think. We know that's what they intended to do. And we know that it's possible to have done that. The Spanish Armada and war with England prevented White from returning to his colony. It took him a long time. He did return in 1590 and he didn't find anybody. Now, we all know about the writing on the post, right? You've all heard about that. So if they left, they were supposed to write where they went on a post or a tree, and they wrote something. So they were supposed to do a Maltese cross if they were in distress. Well, there was no Maltese cross. So they had 4 boats, right? So it's our belief, and lots of people's belief, that some of them did go to Hatteras. It was, Manio lived down that way. They had connections. They didn't have enough connections to put 118 souls down there at Hatteras. The community could not have fed them. But they probably did take a boat to Hatteras, and that would be a good lookout point for ships going past and things like that. Then the other 3 ships could have transversed up to the Albemarle Sound. When they got there, they found the pendants and the boats were gone. No people, no boats. And they found the word CRO on a tree without the Maltese cross. And they found the word Croatan on the frame of the fort door, which is talking about Hatteras, Buxton. So did some of the 118 people go to Manio's Croatan tribe? I would say yes. I would say they probably did. 7 men lost their lives in the rough sea. Here we go again with that North Carolina shoreline. Every time you turn around, we're losing supplies or people getting injured, and 7 men lost their lives in the rough seas approaching Roanoke Island in their boats. Checking on, where is my daughter, Eleanor? Where is my granddaughter, Virginia? Where's her husband? 4 anchors were lost, and the 1590 expedition abandoned their search for the colonists. They didn't go any more places to look around. They just headed back to England. Now, you've heard about Salmon Creek and Site X. This, I so agree with this too. Remember, we have 3 boats. Now, Salmon Creek is on the Albemarle Sound. It's actually in Bertie County, which is where I'm from. And they've proven fish wear, things like that. They found that they feel like date back. And that reminds me, I've got Indian pottery that I pick up off my shore. I've got coral shells that are right there because I live on the Suffolk Scarp, and some other interesting things down there. So it makes a lot of sense that they would leave a boat full of people at Salmon Creek. Salmon Creek was the trading center for Edenton, where the Weppamioc Indians lived with Chief Okisco. The Mangoat came down from Roanoke to trade there, and the Choanoke came down to trade there. So it was a known trading center. So it makes sense that it's on that Albemarle Sound, that big body of water, that they may have stayed there. And then sent the other boat, 2 boats and 1 ship on to try to get to Chesapeake. I told you about Sir Walter Raleigh inventing the copper bottom ship. Dorothy was left there, well documented. There is a ship on the northern end of Bennett's Creek. How did it get there? Wouldn't we all like to know? How did it get there? Hunter's Mill Pond was built in the early 1700s. This ship is about 40 feet and has 2 masts. How did it get there? See, that's all the way to the Dismal Swamp. And right about where 10 is where the ship was located. And it was seen for many years after that. It was seen by these children in the 1800s, and then it was seen by other people after that. Remember, hurricanes raised the level of the rivers and creeks up about 4 feet on some of our bad hurricanes that they just had 2. Remember, they were told to turn north to follow the Chowan River, and Bennett's Creek was a north turn where the Virginia parts. They probably, when you come to Bennett's Creek, you see that, and it kind of catches your attention, and then you look further and the river goes on that way too, but it's almost like they merge together. It would be so easy to take the wrong turn. And then in 2007, some history buffs saw an image on a Google map and felt like it looked like a ship and got permission to look around, but they couldn't find anything. And then they certainly couldn't take anything, and nothing has happened to that. There are also remnants of boats that meet that size that are very, 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 very decayed, just little tiny remnants at this point on Catherine Creek and Deep Creek, which is off the Chowan River, where that's a picture of my husband and our sailboat, which we named Monadnock. We're just doing a little exploring. So, any questions?
Boat that you're referring to, Dorothie, is there anything left of it now? Someone go in and look at it. And 2, what's the pushback from other historians and archaeologists that make them say this is not Dorothie?
Well, good questions. Nobody's actually come out and said that, because nobody's actually gone into that area that is wooded, swampy, thick, wildlife, water life. Nobody's actually done that to explore it. Nobody's saying that it is not. A friend of mine is a diver, and when the water's been high before, he's been there and seen remnants, but it's very, very hard to locate. And Don tried really hard. He researched this about 20 years, and probably the last 5 years he would talk to people and talk to groups and things about it. He tried very hard to get it pushed. There's some interest from the Roanoke Colony group, but nobody's actually gone and done it. No, I don't think they have, and that is really an excellent idea. It's a wooded area now, very grown up. So again, you probably really need to go in there with some heavy duty bulldozers and get to where you're going with it. So.
we would like to thank Ms. Daniels for coming out today. If you are interested in Ms. Daniels' book, it is available for sale in our museum shop, and she will be available just outside the doors of the auditorium if you would like to have her to sign the book. But again, thank you for coming out. Thank you for sharing the information, and thank you all for coming out today.
Thank you for having me, guys. It was terrific.